This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, more on them later. I won't lie to you, video games can be pretty disappointing. I know we like to heap on the expectations and create unrealistic, unattainable standards for video games to live up to, even when all we have is a press release or a short trailer, but it's so easy to be underwhelmed by video games these days. Not all of them, of course, since there's some good stuff around if you're willing to open up, and naturally, there's still some awful games too that have their own way of disappointing, but I want to spend some time talking about some games that I really wanted to enjoy. Everything seemed in place and then it fell apart. It's the sort of thing you'll remember. I've talked about underwhelming, disappointing games before, but that was quite a while ago, and I've since learned that nothing ever changes for too long in the video game industry. In much the same way that I learned ages ago that this video sponsors Raid Shadow Legends pull no punches when it comes to being one of the best RPGs out there. You know, I have to balance this video out a bit because it's such a depressing, downbeat topic that I do need to spend a little bit of time talking about something really positive. 2022 marks Raid Shadow Legends' 3rd anniversary, and I've been lucky enough to have seen most of that, and I can say with confidence that Raid has been amazing since the start and only improved with time, adding more content and game modes every couple of months. In just the last year or so, we've had the Doom Tower, which introduced a whole new world of terrifying bosses to slay with 120 levels. There's been a ton of new heroes added that the artists clearly had a lot of fun designing. Like, look at that guy. There's a new faction now, with the Shadowkin standing out as probably the coolest looking faction in the game. And of course, there's the Hydra clan boss. Easily one of the coolest things they've ever added, and with so many heads to chop off, it can be a hell of a challenge. Raid has been amazing for ages, and it keeps going from strength to strength. I can play it for 5 minutes here or there, or I can pour hours into it and get loads done. With what's coming this month, like 5 awesome new champions, a series of Summer Splash events, and a super special event where you can get the legendary champion Deliana just from logging in and playing Raid for a week, I am here to invite you to the Raid. All you need to do as a new player is enter the promo code MyDeliana to get your hands on everything you need, including 50 XP brews to get Deliana to level 50 instantly, and a ton of silver. Make sure to click my link in the description or scan my QR code here for unique bonuses worth $30, including a free epic champion Aina, 1 energy refill, 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon another awesome champion. All this treasure is waiting for you here as soon as you boot Raid up for the first time. I will see you fine people in the Raid. Alright, so I guess we need to be underwhelmed now, yeah? So I'm not strictly looking at initial impressions from stuff like E3, but I won't lie to you, they're a big help. If you're going to reveal anything to as large an audience as possible, you're going to aim for the gaming industry's flagship event and just hope to God that your game sticks for landing. It's always a risk since so many don't, and yet in 2014, Turtle Rock Studios, the minds behind Left 4 Dead, took a leap with their brand new asymmetrical multiplayer shooter, and holy shit, did the world sit up and take notice. I don't actually remember paying too much attention to Evolve when it won 4 Game Critics Awards at E3 2014, but it is funny to look back on. When The Last of Us won 5 awards 2 years prior, it was seen as the heralding of a really special game coming soon. For that many people to be excited out of their minds, clearly it had to be good, yeah? Well, the critics got lucky with The Last of Us, but not so much with Evolve, because despite all the plaudits, there was a different fate in store for Evolve once actual humans got their hands on it. Maybe that's why the critics loved it so much, they loved being represented so well. Evolve was kind of a disaster from start to finish, which is surprising given that theoretically, it had nothing wrong with it. Truly, there wasn't much of a physical downgrade in Evolve, but this game underwent a pretty drastic downgrade of public opinion once people realized that the gaming press had overhyped the shit out of this thing based on a demo they all played at E3 that wasn't quite like the final product. In truth, it's pretty close, but when you're streamlining the usual gameplay loop for an E3 demo so that it doesn't dawn on you that Evolve is like one really boring game of hide and seek, where this all-powerful monster is better off staying as far away from the hunters as possible, then yeah, you can see where the problems come up. Doubly so for the microtransactions, which, yeah, I know why they wouldn't be at E3, but to give them center stage as soon as the game is public, and for them to be this overpriced and terrible, it's no wonder at all that people didn't stick around with Evolve for long. In fact, besides a free weekend that inflated player numbers by some crazy number, people didn't take to this game at all well, and currently you'll struggle to find more than a couple dozen people across the world queuing for games, even now that Evolve has tweaked its business model and gone free to play. It's literally free and no one wants it! 8 years on from being the media darling of E3 and no one wants to play it. Hardly the next The Last of Us, is it?
I kind of enjoyed Evolve at launch, and I'm a bit in the middle on how to feel about it now, but it's not the worst game ever made and doesn't deserve to be as abandoned as it is now, but it was always inevitable that it was going to fall from the peak that E3 put it on, because, you know, can't we just enjoy games without feeling the need to get so excited that we have to give out awards to unfinished products? It's like you're asking for trouble.
Development hell is pretty devastating. I know some games have emerged relatively unscathed in the past, but make no mistake, you should never expect a game to come out the other side in any serviceable quality. However, a game can go through something that can't quite be labelled as development hell and is more akin to death by delays. And sure, a game may be delayed because its development is just that chaotic, but sometimes it's something a little more corporate. I thought about discussing Cyberpunk 2077's plummet from grace, but that was more of a victim of toxic work environments and dev cycle that was too reliant on crunch. In other words, an amazing recipe ruined by not letting your chefs see their families. Stop fucking doing this. Now, I think the more interesting case is Crackdown 3, which is immediately more striking since that game seemed to drop off the radar for ages and then just popped up out of nowhere at an E3 one year. Truth be told, Crackdown 3 suffered from a lot of delays caused by hardware changes and studio handovers that meant new developers, and it actually didn't go anywhere. It was just pushed back so many times because the game itself was never quite in a releasable state. And yet they did it anyway.
There's actually a number of different ways that you might be underwhelmed by Crackdown 3. On its own, it's a mediocre action game that is surprisingly restrictive, but when you stack it up against the other Crackdown games, then you slowly begin to unravel how bad this game is as a sequel. You know, you can't spend that long not making a Crackdown game and then come out with something like this.
I'm sure there was a moment during Crackdown 3's development where something had to come out. Since it never really went through any kind of legit development hell, it was always on the cards to release at some point, and continually pushing it back meant that it never had time to stew. So in the end, Crackdown 3 was cobbled together with whatever the devs could find around the office at the time, and the end result is something that fails to live up to any and all expectations. It's kind of wild how the final version of Crackdown 3 was revived at E3 with Terry Crews voicing the main character, which is a shorthand explanation of what kind of game you can expect here. The substance is long gone by this point, with the same eye for detail present in previous games completely absent here, and the only way they can turn heads is by drafting in a big name with a lovable personality that can be grafted onto a pretty soulless product. I think I feel bad for it, but I can only show so much sympathy before I remember how much better Crackdown 1 and 2 were. Infinitely more deserving of your time.
Early promise is a trap that so many games reach for and fall miles short of that I think would serve us all a bit better if we were just a tad more mindful of how terrible games can be when the goodwill runs dry. Doesn't matter how amazing that first trailer looks or how excited you are that there's talented people working on a 3D platformer, if things can go wrong, there is a chance that things go terribly wrong. And they also forget how to spell Wonderland.
Did you know that Balan Wonderworld only came out last year? It feels like it's been around for a lot longer than that, but possibly that's just a sign that its short stay in the public consciousness has had quite the negative impact on the poor suckers who believed in this game from the start. I genuinely feel bad for them, since Balan Wonderworld was bright and shiny enough to grab plenty of positive attention, and of a dream team as strong as Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima coming together to create something for the first time since the first Sonic adventure, it naturally seemed like a match made in heaven. Well, trailers can and often are deceptive, and distilling all this magic and wonder into a playable format was always likely to be challenging, but doubly so if there's this much drama behind the scenes. Long story short, Yuji Naka fell out with Square Enix over a number of different things, but mainly Wonderworld's direction, with stuff like story and what should be included in the demo, and by the time the game came out for real, Naka had been removed from the project for 6 months and was so upset with how awful the game was, he tried to sue Square Enix for releasing a disingenuous product. So, really good game, yeah? The downgrades are apparent from the first time you find yourself unlucky enough to be playing Balan Wonderworld, and it's incredibly obvious that this game lost a lot of its drive to be an entertainment piece of media roughly around the time as Naka was taken off the dev team. It's got the basic shell of a colourful 3D platformer, but the same dried husk of a soul as your average politician, and I don't think I've ever played something this tonally inconsistent. Like, it wants you to smile and have fun with all its friendly characters, but the gameplay is so dry and joyless that it's a challenge to stay engaged long enough to finish the first area. Honestly, there should be no chance that a game with this amount of experience and talent behind it could ever be this bad, and yet somehow Balan Wonderworld is truly an awful attempt at making a video game. This is the thing, development is hideously complicated and even the most promising concepts can fall apart under the wrong circumstances. Yes, there was probably a version of Balan Wonderworld at some point that was half as promising as its early trailers, but we're a long way away from that now. It's a hell of a trip back from this. If I tried hard enough, I'm sure I could find a game from decades ago that struggled so much that I'm surprised anything substantial got released at all, but I find it more fun to highlight more recent examples so that people learn to temper their goddamn expectations. We're all watching these trailers years before the game is actually ready, losing our minds at features that are likely little more than a note scribbled in the corner of a whiteboard, and it's unsurprising in the extreme how long we've been falling for this. Babylon's Fall came out in February of this year and wasn't exactly news of the month at a time when the likes of Horizon Forbidden West and Elden Ring were being incredibly distracting, and coupled with some virtually non-existent marketing, Babylon's Fall fell off the radar virtually immediately and has had its player base slowly and painfully grind to virtually a complete stop. 3 months later, Kotaku interviewed the one concurrent player on its servers, and for another Square Enix game to be suffering this badly blows my mind to pieces. It's not just that, this is a Square Enix game in partnership with Platinum Games, the same combination that gave us the excellent Nier Automata, so I don't think this is the same problem as Balan Wonderworld. Babylon's Fall is actually kind of fascinating with just how badly it bungles the formula that we've come to expect from Platinum Games, and it's a wonderful example of why a game needs substance that goes further than being merely skin deep. The combat is fine and dangerously close to being fun, but veers off at the last second when it's presented in dull environments, with a gameplay loop that doesn't adequately reward the player. It's a boring game that somehow manages to make something as exciting as Platinum Games' flippy, whippy combat a bit of a chore to sit through, and surely that had to have taken extra effort. It's like you've got these high quality premium ingredients and you're using it to make pig feed. At some point, the disappointment starts to feel really justified. Games will come and go, and the industry will always find new ways to underwhelm and disappoint, but if you're in the market for that particular bar to be lowered, you needn't waste your precious time waiting for something that won't actually happen. Yeah, sure, Babylon's Fall fell apart as an actualized concept when placed under the tiniest ounce of scrutiny, like sitting on a chair made of bubbles, but we need to accept as a society that we will never see a game downgraded as badly as Aliens Colonial Marines. This truly was the worst kind of miracle, a flash in the pan of epically horrible proportions that seem to redefine how low a games developer will go in order to convince the public that their shitty game is worth buying. It's been a while since Colonial Marines ran through its media circuit. It's actually been the best part of a decade, and it's an indication of what's happened in the game industry since then, that all these years later, and not much has changed. The short of it is that Gearbox and Sega were accused of being dishonest and using some false advertising when they released the trailers for Aliens Colonial Marines that did a pretty good job of selling this game to the public. It's this horror shooter hybrid that is trying really hard to be reminiscent of the second Alien film, and with this kind of dynamic lighting and top quality level of detail, it looked to be doing something like this for sure. No though, because Gearbox are slippery bastards, and were reportedly too busy with Borderlands 2 and, Duke Nukem Forever, apparently, and so a lot of the development on Colonial Marines was farmed out to some other smaller studios who I suppose couldn't quite match up to the fake trailer that Gearbox put out. Either way, the version of the game that was released in 2013 was so far off that lawsuits were filed against Gearbox and Sega for false advertising. I think if it wasn't for Alien Isolation, which came out the year after and had Creative Assembly at the helm instead, I think the idea of an Alien video game would have been forever tainted. Development was so botched that they couldn't code the xenomorphs to act like living creatures, and it was one easily fixable error in the code behind their AI that left them looking like this. Nothing but the best from the talent behind Duke Nukem Forever. Who could have predicted that?
I'm pretty sure the lawsuit against Colonial Marines was dropped because Gearbox and Sega were covered by the trailers not showing final footage, but I feel like that just sets a really bad precedent because they fully got away with one there. I feel like we should just not watch any trailers ever again. This is RabbidLuigi, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give a like and subscribe for more in the future, and if you want to watch another one right now, there's one here where I rank every Zelda game from worst to best. I also want to thank my top supporters on Patreon, including the Green Scorpion and Sarah Malion. Thank you for watching, and never believe their lying bullshit.